Okay, good morning. Certainly want to welcome Tampa Bay Water to our interview session this morning. We have a theme of Think Global, Act Locally. And so we have our Journeys in Journalism students from Johns Hopkins Middle School and Melrose Elementary with us today. And they will be asking some very hard questions to Mr. Sean Jones. I want to give you just a brief bio. Sean Jones is a water quality scientist at Tampa Bay Water, working on source water assessment projects, data and GIS analysis, and potable drinking water quality studies. Current projects include the design and generation of a water quality monitoring system to detect source water contamination events and compiling large data sets to generate water quality dashboards across the Tampa Bay Water network. Prior to joining Tampa Bay Water, he worked as an environmental health advisor for the Department of State in Baghdad, Iraq. His hobbies include playing soccer, mountain biking, school, and hanging out with his wife and 2 kids and 4 pets. Wow. Sean, welcome to our series. We are super excited to have you to join us. But at this time, I am going to allow our scholars to have an opportunity to have conversations with you. So we'll toss this off to our J-Hop Times scholars first, and we'll allow the scholars to begin.
All right.
I would like to ask, how is water clean?
How is water clean? So we have a variety of different sources at Tampa Bay Water, and we use different treatment methods for each source. So for instance, we have surface water treatment plant that treats water from our rivers that supply us. And then we also have a desalination plant that treats seawater from the Tampa Bay. The desalination plant uses the process of desalination. And I actually have figures and graphics that I can walk through and show you some of these different treatment processes if you guys are interested in it.
What are the water sources?
So we have several. We have 11 different groundwater well fields. We have 2 river systems, the Alafaya River, located here in south central Hillsborough County, the Tampa Bypass Canal, also located in Hillsborough County, and the Tampa Bay Water, which is located also in Hillsborough County. It's located next to the Tico power plant.
All right. Do any of your programs help wildlife, and if so, how?
We have so part of the reason, we'll take a step back here. So the reason why Tampa Bay Water was created, because in the 90s, there were water wars between the different customers that we serve. And this might be a long explanation, but it'll be a good one, and it's going to get to your point. We serve 6 different member governments: the city of Tampa, Hillsborough County, Pasco County, St. Petersburg, Pinellas County, Newport Richey. I'm forgetting one other one. I can't remember. Did I say city of Tampa? So six customers, and all of these different local governments were competing for groundwater, essentially. So they were creating well fields, and they were drawing down the aquifer so low that the wetlands and lakes on the surface were actually drying up. So we have photos in time where lakes that you could once canoe on or ride a boat or fish on were completely dried out and covered in grass. So the mission of Tampa Bay Water was to take all of these sources that the member governments had, unify them under one umbrella, and then figure out different sources to use to prevent the aquifer from going too low and drying out lakes. So to do that, that's why we created our different sources. Now we're not just relying on groundwater. We have surface water sources, we have a desalination plant, and then we also have a big 15.5 billion gallon reservoir that we built to store water as our savings account. And so as the result of that, we're seeing recovery in the environment that is leading to productive habitats again for fish and for wildlife and for also plants as well.
All right, thank you. You answered 2 questions in one.
Okay, how much water can you clean per day?
Yeah, so we supply anywhere from 180 to 220 million gallons per day. So I know these numbers are kind of massive and they're kind of hard to wrap your head around. So I did some, horseshoe math here. So you guys are familiar with Buck Stadium, right? We won the Super Bowl. You're familiar with the stadium there. So I calculated the area of the stadium as if it were a giant swimming pool, right? So, when you fill up a pool, it takes some time, and it's based on how much water and how fast you can fill that pool. So basically, if we wanted to fill the Bucks Stadium, right, with the amount of water we produce a day, can you guys guess how many days do you think that would take?
Did you really say 2? Probably realistically, maybe a couple weeks.
I'm not good at math.
So if we were to fill it based on what we're producing today, it would take us around 3.5 days to fill that entire stadium with water.
You were close. Smart at math.
Math, we don't know her.
Okay, we're gonna bounce the question over to Melrose. We'll just do it back and forth. Melrose, would you like to answer the question?
Third grader Raven has a question real quick.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
What happens if the ground dries up? The groundwater. She wants to know what happens if the groundwater dries up.
So if the groundwater dries up, we actually have we've diversified the sources of water to make the region more drought tolerant. So if the groundwater were to dry up or reach a low level, we have the desalination plant in our back pocket. We have a reservoir, and then we also have 2 surface water sources that we can rely on. And I just want to add to that point, we prevent the groundwater from drying up by maintaining permit requirements. So we have permits from the water management district here that sets a limit of how much groundwater we can take from the aquifer, and that's set at 90 million gallons per day. And so we never, it's on a running average, but we basically always comply with that permit to prevent that issue from occurring.
How complicated is it to clean water?
It's actually, when you look at history and the methods and technologies that we have used to treat water, there has certainly been a lot of advances, but the process and some of the methods are kind of the same. They used to use carbon from ash from fires to filter water. We use activated carbon today at our plant. And we actually rely upon microbes that attach to that carbon to help us treat water. So I'd like to think of treating water as a team sport. It relies upon many professionals, from environmental scientists to chemists to engineers. And there's a lot of people that have to throw their hat in the ring to figure out how to deliver the water quality that folks want to see at the end of the tap.
How is water filtered?
So there's several ways. Again, we have two plants. One is the desalination plant, and desalination works by using what's called reverse osmosis. And if you guys are you guys familiar with chain link fences? You know, if you hit a baseball outside of a baseball park, you got to climb the fence to go get it, right? Look at reverse osmosis membranes as kind of like a chain link fence, right? And if you were to have a bunch of different balls from different sports, right? A basketball, a football, a baseball, a soccer ball, and ping pong balls. Every other ball represents contaminants or salts or some other ion in the water. And water would, in this scenario, would be represented by a ping pong ball, right? So if you were to take just a giant basket of all of those different types of balls and kind of push them through that fence, the only thing that would get through are the ping pong balls. That's how reverse osmosis works. So we push water through it's called a selective membrane, and then we filter out the clean water on the other side.
All right. How do you help stop things like natural disasters?
So are you referring to
things like that? Floods?
What's
Floods?
that? Floods?
Yes.
Yeah, so we don't really have we don't really have a say in flood control. We actually rely on water from flood control structures. So I guess you could say that since we withdraw water from a flood structure, we're actually removing water that could potentially have gone into flood regions that are inhabited in the Tampa area.
We have a question from Javante. What are some risks for water conservation in Tampa Bay? Risk for water contamination.
What are some water contaminants? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, what are the risks that we might see in Tampa Bay? So like what things might affect our water?
Okay. Yeah, so there's a widespread slew of different potential contaminants out there. You look at farming practices, there can be pesticides or insecticides, there can be general runoff from people, you know, applying different compounds to their grass. There could be motor oil from cars, and when it rains, all of that can travel into a water supply. And so what we do is we have a really advanced treatment system that is very capable at handling and removing those contaminants.
You know what? How salt water is filtered.
Can't hear you, buddy.
What's the process of filtering salt water? What's the process of filtering salt water?
So that's that reverse osmosis process that I explained before. Again, so if you were to take, you know, that basket full of different sporting balls, and you were to shove them through a chain link fence, and essentially on the other side, all you're going to get out is the ping pong balls in that mix. That's reverse osmosis, and that's how we desalinate our drinking water from that source.
So when you like put water under pressure, how does that like remove all the contaminants in the water?
Good question. So again, it comes down to size, right? So we want to only select for small water molecules, and most of the contaminants that we're treating for are very large in nature. And so if you think about, you know, again, that example, it's the best example I could come up with. If you have a chain link fence and you have that basket of different sport balls, and you want to only filter out the good water molecules represented by ping pong balls, you just have to throw them all against that chain link fence. And that's very, very energy intensive. It takes a lot of energy to do that because you're forcing water against its natural gradient. And what happens is the contaminants then will travel along that barrier. In the real process, what happens is the contaminants that we remove will travel along that barrier, and then they will get reintegrated with the water stream and blended and put back out into the environment. So to give you a big picture, we're co-located next to the Tico power plant. And the Tico power plant is where it's at because it needs water to cool down some of its processes for generating electricity. So about 1 billion gallons of water goes into that process. We siphon off a few million gallons and then run that through that reverse osmosis process. The brine solution, i.e. the contaminants, will then get reblended with the portion of unused water from the Tico power plant, and then sent back out into the bay.
Mr. Fazla, do you have a question?
We have a question over at Melrose, if that's okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Coburn.
Kids like us can do to protect our water sources?
Awesome question. I love that. So I think it starts with what you value, what you enjoy doing. And if you were to think deeply about what you value and what you like to do, do you enjoy being outside in nature? Do you enjoy water sports? Do you enjoy fishing or swimming? That having that sense of connectedness to activities that you enjoy, it allows you to become a good steward to protect those resources. So when you have that vested interest in wanting to protect what you like doing, you're more likely to go to bat and do the right things. You know, for instance, you know, you can use less water. This way, you're not having an impact on the environment. You can choose to use less chemicals for different things like lawn care or lawn maintenance. You can make sure that you're recycling your oil from cars. You can make sure that you're advocating on behalf of the natural parks and natural environments in your area to make sure that they stay intact as they are to prevent, you know, development or environmental degradation, which could impact water quality.
about that like water thing, once I saw a video about Earth compared to a ball of all of our fresh water that we have access to, and the ball compared to Earth was just really small. And just comparing that to like the billions of people we have on this Earth, we might not even have enough at some point.
Yeah, and it's a very humbling depiction when you see that graphic of how much water is actually drinkable, that's not bound up in ocean. And so I think once you see that, it kind of gives you perspective of, hey, maybe I don't need to run the sink while I'm brushing my teeth and not using that water. It gives you a better sense of how you can manage the water resources much better.
Do you think that people, if they start acting now, that we can make a perfect water experience?
So I'm always hesitant to use the word perfect. I tend to strive for better. I think we'll never ever get to a perfect solution in anything. And the reason I say that is because if something is perfect, it means you don't have to look or to manage potential impacts. And I'll give you an example. So desalination was once thought of as the perfect solution to all of our water crises, and but there's impacts related to that, and they have to be managed and they have to be mitigated responsibly. So if we went with the notion that it's the perfect solution, we may not have had the vested interest to make sure that we're being good stewards and monitoring that. But I do believe that yes, we can continuously improve and be better stewards of our water resources and our environments. And to be honest, I think in my lifetime, we have certainly come a long way. And I think in some of your teachers or your parents' lifetime, if you talk about pollution and water supply in the 60s and prior to the 70s, and you look at the advent of the EPA, there's been major improvements in water quality in our country. And I think with the fact that young people like you guys have such a vested interest in protecting the environment and wanting to be good stewards of the environment and live sustainable lives, I think we're going to be continuing to trend in a very positive direction. I have a lot of faith in you folks.
This is Mrs. Pruitt. I just wanted to also share in our background, you'll see a mark that our scholars brainstormed and came up with the idea of thinking globally and acting locally. And so you make some very good points about things that we can do now to certainly protect our water sources for the future. So we certainly appreciate that. I think we may have had a question again from our Melrose scholars. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, all of our scholars, we have lots of questions popping up. I'm going to have Raven go ahead and start.
How do you know if the water is safe?
Great question. So the organization that I talked about before, the Environmental Protection Agency, has a list of, I think it's 65 different chemical parameters that must be tested to determine the safety of water. And so we have staff that are dedicated that go out and test water samples every month to make sure that one, processes for treatment are in place and they're running like they should, and then two, that we are below those thresholds that the EPA has set for the Safe Drinking Water Act.
What chemicals are used to treat the water?
Another good question. So there's a couple of different chemicals that that we use. We use ferric sulfate as it's called a flocculant. So at the regional surface water treatment plant where all the river water comes in, if you look at river water, typically it could be pretty cloudy and full of particulates. And so this ferric sulfate allows flocculation to occur, which then allows some of the bigger debris to kind of settle out, and it allows the water to be clarified. We also change pH by either adding acidity or adding a base, depending on what the water conditions are. And then we have, it's not a chemical per se, but it's a really cool treatment process. At the Regional Surface Water Treatment Plant, we use ozone, which is a gas, and then that helps really break down some of the contaminants, and it makes them, this is another really cool step that I can nerd out on, but it breaks down those contaminants, and then it goes through another treatment phase where that activated carbon is, where the bugs are. We call it the bugs, but there's bacteria that's latched onto the activated carbon, and then the bugs eat those contaminants and clean the water.
Mr. Fazla, do you have a question now?
Yes, we do have a question. Thank you.
We got water fluids in our body, and 60 million years that the water is going and dried up. How many days we have left to survive off our water fluids in our body?
Can you, how many days can you survive without water? Is that the question?
No, that we got water fluids in our body, and the water's gonna dry up eventually that we drink. How many days we have to left to survive off our water?
How many days do we have?
The water that we have now, or the water in our body?
And the water in our body, because the water's gonna eventually dry up and go away.
So you're saying all water dries up over millions of years?
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about on the earth, or are you talking about in the body?
Both.
How about this? How about let me give you, I think I understand the question that you're trying to ask, and let me try to answer it as best as I can. And if I don't, let me know. So as far as water goes on the planet Earth, we're not losing any water. Water will cycle through the earth through what's called the water cycle. So we don't have to worry about losing water. But as I think it was, I forget who said it before, you know, what matters most is where that water is. If it's fresh water, if it's locked in ice caps, if it's locked in seawater. So that could potentially change over time. As far as our bodies go, as long as we're eating food that is that has water in it, and we're drinking water, we'll never have to worry about drying our bodies out of water. We'll constantly lose water through sweat, through excretion, and through just breathing. We breathe out water out of our mouths and our nose. But as long as we're drinking the recommended, I think it's 8 liters a day of water, you'll never have to worry about that. It's only when you stop drinking water that you have to be concerned about potentially drying up and becoming dehydrated.
Yes, and this is Mrs. Pruitt, and that's one of the things, you know, we've been talking about as we've been researching this topic. Certainly one, to stay hydrated within ourselves, but then also to conserve, think about water conservation as a whole. One of our instructors, Mr. Grayson, wanted to jump in and just share a quick focus around justice, just when we around social justice. I'll let you go ahead and bring that up?
So they said, as we were preparing for this press conference, we looked actually at the Flint, Michigan water situation, and we have such a greater appreciation for clean, fresh water. I mean, that is an eye opener. What are some of the lessons learned from that experience that you've seen in the business?
Yeah, I think from certainly a global perspective, it just shows you how a decision can lead to major impacts. And so there was a decision there to change sources, and it was for cost, to make things cheaper. However, I guess you could say not all the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. So, I think certainly, I know for a fact our utility takes everything into consideration whenever making a change. We are extremely conservative in how we estimate impacts, and making sure that we are doing study after study to make sure that we are meeting the expectations of the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Florida Safe Drinking Water regulatory rules as well.
I don't know if you have any relationship to the Oldsmar incident recently that was discovered or happened prior to the Super Bowl. What message did that send us here in the safety of water and security?
Great question. So if I think a lot of American, and I'll start with this, I think a lot of us certainly take infrastructure for granted. If you were to look at your water supply, and this kind of ties in with what happened at Texas as well, we kind of don't appreciate water sometimes. It seamlessly comes out of the tap. It's always there. It's reliable. Systems are in place to make sure that you're getting that water continuously. And so I take that Oldsmar incident as a shot across our bow of, there can be some serious impacts if we don't continue to protect our nation's infrastructure. And I think one of the great things about Tampa Bay Water is we have a really, really good cybersecurity team and a SCADA team, which is what was hacked at Oldsmar, where they are constantly doing their due diligence to, one, protect our infrastructure, and then two, make sure that we're protecting our citizens.
Thank you so much, Sean. This has been an absolute fantastic conversation around protecting our water sources. Again, our students are thinking globally and acting locally. And so I know that you have armed them with tons of data and information, a lot of data that I did not know. So I learned something new today. So thank you so much. So at this time, we are again going to say thank you from the Journeys in Journalism program here at Johns Hopkins Middle School and Melrose Elementary. I'll give our students in studio at Johns Hopkins an opportunity to introduce themselves very quickly, and then we'll sign out with our students at Melrose. So real quickly, Johns Hopkins, go for it.
I'm Kendall Francis. I'm the executive producer.
I'm Dee Room, and I'm a student here at Johns Hopkins.
Oh, I'm Layla Purcell.
Hey there, I lost you.
I'm Nason Kingdom Cooper. I'm a multimedia journalist here.
I'm James Lynch.
I am Keon Stokes.
I'm Alexandra Smith. I'm one of the online students here. Hopefully I'm coming back next year in 7th grade.
Yay. Okay. Melrose?
Hi, hello, I am Raven Bradford. Hi, I am Yumi Cummings.
Hello, I'm Devontae. And what grade are you guys in?
Third.
Wonderful. And again, our instructors, Ms. Coburn at Melrose Elementary, Mr. Faza. I don't know, Mr. Faza, can you turn your camera on? Here at John Hopkins Middle, and we have 2 adjuncts. If they would walk on set, Mr. Grayson, Mr. Parler. So if we all can just hang on with your cameras on, we just want to take a quick photo to share back out to Miss Lori. So hang on, everybody wave and say hello. Awesome. Again, thank you so much, Sean. You are a wealth of information. We appreciate the time. And ladies and gentlemen, this will conclude our interview session today on Thinking Global, Acting Locally. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where's this?
It's moving.
Thank you.
Oh.
Hey,